All right, jumping into planning space. So, okay, so now you have a plan. You need to move. You need to move temporarily. You need to move forever. You might need to rehouse before, during, afterward. Best case scenario, everything's going to be perfectly housed, ready to move, cataloged impeccably, every shelf labeled, every nook and cranny accounted for, and you're going to figure out where it's all going to go. You know exactly what shelving you need and how it's going to be laid out and the room size and all that. Well, actually, that's a huge undertaking, and it starts with a space program. Sometimes it's called a basis of design. That is a collaboration with an architect or an engineer, and it really defines what your needs are. You're not saying I need this room and that room. You're saying I have this and I want it to function in a certain way. I want my space to be functional for supporting my mission, for supporting, the collections, for supporting access, whatever that happens to be. And it's probably a combination of all of those things. And that's going to inform the design. And then you're going to look at the budget, what's available, and making the best use of, meeting all of those needs or balancing the needs if not everything can be equally prioritized and funded. And from there, you start, looking at, if you're going into a reuse or a renovation project, then your spaces are a little bit predefined. But there's so much opportunity for creativity and innovation. And that's what you guys all need to bring to the table, understanding the collections and the functions, working with collection managers, working with registrars, working with people managing access, security, the engineering team, the facilities team, every department that is involved in a building project needs to speak their expertise and collaborate in support of the mission. Always returning to, that just like you have a collection development policy, you have an institutional mission that says what is your ultimate goal as an institution, and your building needs to support that. Your collections need to support that, all rowing in the same direction to meet those goals. So, one of the challenges in working with a design team is you're almost never going to find an archive optimizational designer, right? You're going to work with architects and engineers and contractors that build and design all kinds of things. And so you need to bring your voice to the table and talk about your priorities and what are your ultimate goals. And there's going to be multiple iterations, multiple passes that you have to iterate through. It's a constant dialogue. So after you have your program, it starts with, what do you have? What's your stuff? Who are your people? What are your departments? And how you see yourself working and collaborating. What adjacencies do you imagine? What are your environmental conditions requirements? And all of that it's a spreadsheet, it's a narrative, it's a list, it's bullet points, and that ultimately will translate into a building. That's where it starts. From there, architects will disappear, come up with some schematics, some bubble diagrams, like, hey, how about this here? How about that there? And it seems somewhat abstract, but it's a really important step in saying, if you're ready to move forward in starting a conceptual design, in starting your design documents, which are not going to be ready for permitting, but you want to have your functional adjacencies sorted out. It's like, okay, I want you've applied that basis of design or that program document to your available space, and you say, okay, this is my vault, this is my other vault, this is cold storage, this is whatever that is, here's my collection management team, here's the thing that always gets forgotten or shoehorned into the corner is all the people that are supporting those things. The janitor's closet, the break room, the mechanical space, the IT closet, all of those things. So that's why, again, all these voices to the table to make sure that you are optimizing for the available budget and space. The cubby holes for researchers' backpacks, absolutely. Having comfort, health and safety, comfort, that's why people are going to come to a building, or our building gets a bad reputation, and it's hard to get to, it's hard to work in, it's hostile in some way. We always want to make it welcoming and inviting and functional.
One thing that I've experienced a lot, and I don't want to impugn the entire profession of architects, but I feel like often beauty and functionality are in conflict when spaces are getting planned and designed, and so there's often a desire to have things look really nice and work really badly, or work really well but look really horrible. I think in an ideal scenario, you have a compromise of the two. But that's often the false dichotomy we end up with, right? Is that a beautiful, unfunctional space, or a functional, unattractive space?
Depends on your school of thought, or what architects you may have worked with in the past,
or what you think is beautiful.
But that form, it doesn't follow function, and the function doesn't follow the form. They are wrapped up together. And form informs the function, absolutely. And we don't want it to drive the function. But again, it's a relationship, it's a dance to have accessible, wonderful buildings, as well as serve their primary functions. But also adaptability, right? So so often, the design, it's so design forward, and I'm not talking about just purely the functional elements of the design, but you can have lots of beautiful finishes and bespoke furniture and built-ins, but the needs of an institution change. And I tell you, a renovation can cost way more than if you get it wrong than a new construction. So on a cost per square foot basis, that is. So having spaces where you're not building in limitations, and you're including flexibility, growth, and change over time is super important in the planning process. No architect wants to plan their building on the assumption that it will be changed. But that's where you need to start from. Assume that there will be change in the future, and you're not going to get it right. And you have to be able to feel okay about adapting to the needs. Like, you might have anticipated you were going to have a staff member at a reception desk. That turns out not to be the case, or you need two staff members suddenly, and you built something in for a specific narrow function, or you need a larger piece of equipment, or more likely you built it for a large piece of equipment which is now doesn't exist, or it's or now it's outsourced. So
or now it's tiny. Like think about our computers that we used to, we can do with a smartphone what we used to have to do with like a giant, big boxy monitor and a CPU and a keyboard with wires and a mouse. Like all of those things have gotten so much smaller. File cabinets, exactly. File cabinets. What a great example.
Yeah. So modularity, and that's true of also entire rooms. Those functions may change over time. You may find that you're collecting in a different area, and the environmental conditions need to have some flexibility. in terms of, it was built for 68 degrees, 50% relative humidity, but now we need it to be closer to 64 and 40% relative humidity, and your systems have to allow for that. I have adjacencies down here, exclamation point, and yeah, adjacencies are huge. As soon as you start leaving your collection space, how are you supporting those? I mentioned the janitor's closet. If a custodian needs to get a bucket of water to mop the floors from 50 yards away versus 5 yards away, you are adding operating expense, and you repeat that day after day, multiple times a day, potentially, year after year, it's real money. So doing microscopic cost benefit analysis and seeking out opportunities everywhere you possibly can in every nook and cranny to optimize, flexible, but optimized for long-term building support.
I think anybody who's in a collections housing context would get a lot, as I do, out of watching HGTV shows. So like what you're talking about, Andrew, is anytime somebody's remodeling their kitchen and they have that like pot filler faucet right over the stove so that you can like fill your whole pasta pot without having to carry it across the kitchen. All of those like space design and functional practical planning considerations, I feel like I'm so much smarter about those things and realize the possibility of doing things a different way from, I'm just going to schlep it from the hose pipe in the back of the building to the front of the building, like sloshing water down the hallway the whole way, figuring out ways like sometimes it doesn't even occur to me. And I was like, wow, that's so brilliant. But we all are capable of solving these problems in our own domestic environments, and just thinking about how those things might play out for a professional environment is actually not that different.
And also vertical adjacency. So if you have elevators that you need to take, or a freight elevator, and putting the thing that you are using that's most needed to be transported, equipment or a room that contains something closest to that is going to and get you where you need it to be. If you don't have room on that floor, maybe the floor below or above or a few floors away, but close to those doors so that you have that access and availability.
I was at a facility once where they had a parking lot for their book carts, and I thought that's so brilliant. And it was right by the elevators, and it was just sort of like, if you're not using a cart, it goes back in the parking lot. So it was terrific from a adjacency standpoint, from like a convenience standpoint, but it also sort of created a more respectful system, and a sense where, like, if there's a place for something, then people will put that thing in its place. So having designated areas or designated spots for things, or parking lots, or maybe not built-in shelving for things, but sort of available shelving or designated space for things that you use all the time is a really smart idea too.
Right. And nobody wants to have underutilized space, but if you're a growing collection and you grow internally, as opposed, within the collection, as opposed to at the end, as if it's cataloged instead of accessions merely, you need to be building in time. You're buying time, and you need to understand, like, how long is this building, based on our current collecting rates, how long is this room going to be added to? And you don't want to pay for a room that's half full. Nobody does, but maybe there's a case for that sometimes. Or maybe you need a plan to grow in a different way in the future. We have this thing about on-site and off-site. It's like, maybe we can afford to have everything on-site today, but we're going to reprioritize in the future based on usage, based on environmental condition requirements, and certain stuff will need to be eventually moved off-site additional expense, whether it's leased or owned. They both have high expenses potentially. How far is it? How long do you need to transport it? What vehicle do you need? Insurance for that? A whole set of new risk management considerations. I work with a institution that has a number of vans, and their consideration, they understand this, they get it, that the highest risk comes not from working in a building, not from doing the daily activities, climbing ladders, fixing things, working with mechanical equipment. It comes from getting in a vehicle. So if you're putting stuff in a vehicle and you're going a distance away, you have this other layer of risk that you are building into it. So again, it's this push and pulls, like what can we have on site in the ideal, but where do we see ourselves later on? Like if you're in a high rent environment, as we probably all are, it's a major consideration to put things in a offsite leased facility. On the other hand, our own space is, might be better value for another function, and all of those collections need to be at a offsite location. Does anybody have any particular immediate challenges related to on-site, off-site, owned space, long-term leases, short-term leases? They're all unique challenges, but opportunities and are available for everything.
Losing your lease and having to move in a hurry, that can also happen.
That's why I said long-term versus short-term lease. Mm-hmm. There's almost no lease that's too long. Mm-hmm. Because those rents can be a surprise 10 years from now, and it just might not be sustainable.
I have a question in relation to that, given that one of the things that we talked about, particularly storing collections in Southern California, in Los Angeles, who would one go to for assistance to find space in Southern California? Are there real estate agents that have an eye towards community property or nonprofit buildings? I'm just wondering, because it's like space is real estate is such an issue, right, in LA. And it's so hard to wrap your head around. So I'm wondering if you know from your experiences, either of you, a person or entity or characteristics we can look for if we are trying to find a space.
Yeah, I've for so long, I keep coming back to this idea that there ought to be a consortium for storage, offsite storage, where various institutions can buy into a project and be able to send their things to an offsite facility, basically providing on a nonprofit basis what moving companies and cooks and croziers and all the other U.S. art all will happily do, but at quite a premium. Unfortunately, it's so hard for institutions to collaborate in such a way. Because everyone has different means and priorities at different times in their organization's life. But if there was a way, Lisa, if perhaps LA Subject can have a talk about something like this. What if there was somewhere out in the Inland Empire where real estate, used to be affordable, a few warehouses. I wouldn't put it all in one because all your eggs in one basket. Where institutions can lease from a consortium and collaborate on storage for the region. I don't have a great answer for that. I wish there was an answer. I don't know of an existing opportunity there, other than a benevolent large institution with spare space.
I mean, I know that there are sort of like, not matchmaking services, but sort of like websites where you can find property that is, commercial properties that are for rent or for sale or for lease. But kind of like Zillow for commercial properties. But I really don't know that there is any such thing for nice storage stuff. I really wish there were. I mean, that might be a $1,000 idea somebody just had.
When I was at the academy, we were working with the commercial realtor, to find warehousing space within a 20-minute drive. And the market at the time was really, really tough. And every time we thought we found a reasonable candidate and we got the decision makers in a room to look at a specific space, it was gone. Even if we were willing to pay the asking price. So this was pretty raw space, often without climate control. It would have to be built out. We just needed something to place, extra inventory for the store to begin with, but seeing a long-term need for offsite facilities. Other than buying and building a bespoke space, there's a lot of challenge, risk, and sleepless nights in dealing with a lease situation, I think, right now in this particular geographic area and time in real estate.